Hi students, this is Julia, your instructor, and this video is to give you some guidance in giving you some help with your self-concept presentation. So in this speech, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two things. First, I'm going to show you the shield that I made for the praxis that is a good preparation for the self-concept presentation. And I'm going to show you some of the various things that I drew on the shield. The second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a self-concept presentation. So this is going to take you through the process of making my self-concept presentation without spoiling my backstage. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you my shield. This is my shield that I made last year. Now, I'm not going to win any awards for art, quality, drawing on here. Of course, I'm not the worst drawer in the world, but um, the idea here is not to be drawing with artistic talent and high quality. Really, what you're supposed to be doing is drawing metaphorically would be on your shield if you were carrying around a shield for protection as well as to advertise uh, who you are. So this is four objects on here that I'm going to describe to a certain amount of detail. This object here, this one that looks like a rectangle with these two holes here, this is a ruck plate. So this is a plate that's made out of steel, and these are little handholds that are there so that you can move this plate around without a whole lot of difficulty. But the point of a ruck plate is it's sort of like a weight that you would put on some dumbbells in a gymnasium, but a ruck plate is designed to be put into a backpack. So if you're thinking of like weightlifting, uh, a ruck plate is a really good way of making a backpack heavier so you can get more of a workout from it. So I do a lot of backpacking, and putting a ruck plate in my backpack is a really good way for me to weight train for some of my trips. I'm not going to say what this is. This is going to be something that I'm going to describe in a limited amount of detail, metaphorically, and this is going to be a reflection of something that's in my backstage. You may recognize this um, based off of things that are near and dear to you. Um, so we'll see how that unfolds. I am a jilted lover. I have um, a a somewhat unconventional gender and sexual identity, and there have been many, many occasions where I have opened myself up to somebody, and my love was definitely not requited in a positive way. So this kind of scenario is a common experience for me. Now, this object here is a little bit more complicated. So there's a spherical object, and then there's this line that's going around it with this other line with arrows on it. This is an image of a planet as well as a a route for somebody or something on the surface of this planet can launch into the air and use this path in order to reach orbit. So that's what this particular object is about. And the big reason why I have this particular object on my shield is because I'm a really big fan of astronomy, a really big fan of rockets. I'm a big enthusiast of rocket science, even though I'm not formally trained in that. I play a video game called Kerbal Space Program that is a physics simulator where you can actually build and fly rockets. I get a lot of joy out of that. So that's kind of a walkthrough of my shield. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a presentation that capitalizes on this material that I created for my shield and give you a full-on presentation that models what I would like for you to do with your self-concept presentation. The year is 2020, and this was just before the pandemic, January. I was at the Grand Canyon in Arizona, and I had just embarked on a 8-day trip by myself down into the canyon to Bright Angel, and it was a pilgrimage for me. I had an enormous amount of fun um, having that hike all by myself. Um, and I almost really hurt myself. I have to be careful to be a little bit easier on my knees and to make sure that I'm a little bit more in shape for that. So this speech is going to be a presentation of who I am. Some of these things that I'm going to be telling you are a little bit more clearer than others because there are some aspects of myself that I can't be as direct as other things. So in this speech, I'm going to talk about two things. First, I'm going to talk to you about some qualities about myself that are in my front stage. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a story about my backstage. In my front stage, I have three attributes that I think are a really good sum of who I am. I'm a backpacker, I am a rocket buff, and I'm a jilted lover. So first off, I'm a backpacker. As the story at the beginning of my speech indicates, I'm really big into backpacking. And one of the things that really helped me in getting my backpacking hobby to take off was this thing called a ruck plate. Now, I'm sure that you have heard of a rucksack. Well, a ruck plate is kind of in the same neighborhood as that. It's designed to go into a rucksack or a backpack, and it's designed to not take up a whole lot of space, but to be heavy. And so, one of the things that you have to be able to do when you're going on a multi-day backpacking trip is you have to be able to carry a fair amount of weight on your backpack from day to day and not get worn out. And to do that, you have to be able to train with that amount of weight on your back. And so when you're training with backpacking, it can get really old very fast with trying to do practice hikes, carrying around all of the things that I'm going to need on my multi-day backpacking trip. It's just not an enjoyable experience. So instead of having all of the things that I need to carry with me, I carry this ruck plate in my backpack. And it's just a rectangular steel plate that, if it were round, you would think that it would belong into gymnasium. But yeah, a ruck plate is surprisingly quite uh, important to my week to week life. Another aspect of myself, besides being a backpacker, is I'm a rocket buff. I really enjoy almost all things rockets, so I enjoy learning about how rocket engines work. I like learning about how orbital mechanics work. I like um, learning about um, the physics and the chemistry of life support that we have to invent to keep astronauts alive in space. All of that stuff I find quite fascinating. And so I play a video game called Kerbal Space Program quite frequently. And one of the most common activities that you have to do in Kerbal Space Program is to launch a rocket into orbit. So the image of launching up and then turning and going to the side and eventually reaching an orbit is a very common image that I like to see over and over again. Okay, so those are three attributes about myself. I am a jilted lover, I am a backpacker, and I am a, a rocket buff. So now that I've talked to you about my front stage, I'm now going to talk to you about my backstage. My backstage is, well, somewhat embarrassing. So it's a very personal and intimate um, moment in my life that I will do when I'm backpacking. So the image of a planet, kind of looking down upon it from above, and then having the goal of getting into an orbit where you're going around the planet requires you to go up and then sideways. And so what I do is I use a contraption. It's got a button on it, and it uh, assists me with launching off of the hiking trail and going into orbit. It's quite an enjoyable experience, but there's a whole lot of smoke and fire and brimstone involved, and it's not exactly something that is safe to do in public. You don't want to launch yourself off of the ground and go into orbit while everybody's watching you. Okay, so that is a story of something that's in my backstage. So in this speech, I talked to you about two things. I talked to you about my front stage, where I talked about three attributes about myself, being a backpacker, a jilted lover, and a rocket buff. And then I finally talked to you about my backstage with reaching orbit from my hiking trips. So this is a speech about myself. In order to understand me, you have to know my front stage and my backstage. So to explain why I open my speech talking about the pilgrimage that I made to Bright Angel Campground at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, it was a very, very important moment for me that made me understand that backpacking is more than just getting fit. It is a quasi religious experience for me.